Hi, everybody. We're going to be talking to Mario Chacon today. So I'm just going to be trying to connect with Mario when he gets on. We do have some people scheduled coming up. Claudia Cano is tomorrow. Daniela Kelly, Tatiana Ortiz Rubio, Sophie Ramos, Belize Iriste. So lots of people coming up. And still more being added all the time. We're going to keep doing these Tuesday through Saturday at 1 p.m. Let's add Mario. So I just sent you a request, Mario. I think you'll see it. Hi.
Hey, hi, Tom.
Cool. So you look clear and I can hear you.
Good, good. So do you.
If people have questions, just use this question mark icon down at the bottom. That way we can see it, or just ask it in the comments, and we'll try to scroll through them. Unfortunately, like we could talk for a really long time just reading over your history and stuff. I have a lot I want to talk to you about, but we have to try to keep it to an hour, or if we end up talking longer, we can end it and then make it a two-part kind of thing.
Sounds good.
We'll just play it by ear.
All right.
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Cool.
Despite the circumstances and all.
Right. What a wild moment we're all in, and just every minute just feels like something different, just so bizarre.
Yeah, that it is.
I see you're in your studio.
Yes.
So I guess I'm playing stupid. I just saw you in the building earlier, but I'm also at Bread and Salt. I come down here periodically for maintenance and stuff, but I'd like to hear more about you, just reading over your history and stuff. I saw that you're born and raised in Boyle Heights.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background growing up in LA? And we could even talk about some of the art stuff going on there now. It's pretty interesting that you grew up there and you're now in Barrio Logan.
Right. Yeah, I grew up there in the late 50s and 60s and left there in 1980. So I've been in San Diego really most of my life now. All my children are born here and all. But anyway, life in Boyle Heights back then was quite a bit different than it is today. Boyle Heights is now kind of like a kind of a emerging arts community, as well as here in San Diego in Barrio Logan. And so I see some parallels there. But growing up, it was the kind of the low income working class community. At the time, there was pretty full employment, so a lot of the working class folks owned their homes, and so in that respect, we had that pretty functional working class community with all the dads were employed and some of the moms, and then in the 70s, that all changed. A lot of the large factories in town closed down. Ford Motors, Bethlehem Steel, all the large factories that were employing a lot of the residents that were homeowners in the surrounding communities. So it really created all of the conditions of an economic depression, from the social ramifications of it to the criminal activity, the desperation, the families breaking up, the people losing their homes, and overnight you saw a dramatic change. And so, I understand that something similar happened in San Diego, in Barrio Logan, with the closing of the canneries and a lot of the other employers.
Oh, what a gut-wrenching parallel it is, too, with the 5 freeway bisecting all those neighborhoods. It's the same.
And exact same thing happened, except I think that freeway, the 5, hit Boyle Heights maybe a year or two after it did San Diego.
Yeah.
But we grew up, I mean, our playground was the construction sites for the freeway. We made the best of it. There were no community parks or anything like that in the community, similar to the plight of Barrio Logan. Excuse me. And so that struggle for Chicano Park, for instance, we had very similar issues. We didn't have a Chicano Park struggle in Boyle Heights, but there very well could have been one.
Yeah.
The conditions are certainly the same. I was very fortunate. I got involved in the Chicano movement for our civil rights of the Chicano community there in Boyle Heights, and that literally opened many doors for me. It really stimulated my desire for understanding of political economy and how things affect poor people in working class communities, and through some very odd miracle, I got into UCLA right out of high school. And mind you, I had been kicked out of high school 3 times during my senior year because of the high school walkouts, the political activity that we were involved in as high school students. And so, that struggle, that consciousness has pretty much informed my life, if not, my artwork. So a lot of my work still carries a lot of those themes and those issues.
So you were seeing a lot of activism on campus at UCLA and participating in everything?
A lot, yeah. That first year, I got in 1972, and so it was still it was the tail end of the anti-Vietnam War movement, all of the ethnic rights movements. The women's movement was kind of a fledgling movement at the time, and I was, I just couldn't help myself. I was involved in all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure everywhere you turn, there's something to have been fighting for at the moment, or just so much activism and protest and riots and all kinds of wild stuff going on in LA in 70, 72. So you were, I mean, just looking at some stuff, you were going towards Latin American studies, but I'm also wondering, did you ever have any arts interests? I know you mentioned in another interview that there was a ceramics teacher you had in high school, or things like that. Was art ever on the side, or was it just an interest? Or
it was, I wouldn't call it on the side. It was deep within. It was something that I knew I had. I was sharing with someone just yesterday that my mother used to share that when the children were all playing, I'd be laying on the floor drawing, my childhood. And so I knew I had, this special magic, that I was able to create things and make things out of nothing. And, I was always doodling and sketching and cartooning. But I never fully committed to it I never fully started to think of committing to it until I started college, when I had to choose a major. And my original dream was to be an art major at UCLA. But unfortunately, my dad was more concerned with my financial survival, and told me the old story. Son, artists don't become famous until they're dead, and they're the starving artist story. And so I chose a psychology major initially, not knowing what a psychology major at UCLA would be like, and soon found out it was experimental psychology and more biological science than a behavioral science. And so I changed that to history then, and that's when I went the history and Latin American studies route.
Wow.
And I went most of my college years not painting. Mostly, a little bit of drawing here and there. I did a few illustrations, political newspapers and magazines and things like that. But that was that. I then dropped out of college and truly joined the working class. I became a steel worker at Bethlehem Steel in LA when it was still there.
I did not read that in your info that I could
it wasn't for a very long period, but that was something I had to do. My girlfriend at the time was expecting, and I had to postpone my education for a little bit and try to take care of the things I thought I had to take care of. And so from there, I did finally go back to school. I finished at Cal State LA. I had just a handful of classes that I had to take, and I took them at night since there were no night offerings at UCLA, or at least not the courses I needed to take at the time. And finished, and applied for the master's program in education at San Diego State, with an emphasis in counseling, and that's what brought me to San Diego, and I never left. So I've been here now.
Man, I'm having a technical
30 years.
difficulty with my phone. Just hold on 1 second.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, it's working.
All right.
You know, doing these videos, it's just like wreaked havoc on my phone and computer and all that stuff. So, so did you say that you did go to SDSU also?
Yes, in graduate school. That's what brought me to San Diego. I got accepted to the Department of Education, the education department with an emphasis in counseling. So I did a master's degree there.
Man, you've really done the circuit in Southern California, because you also were you at UCSD also?
No, I worked at UCSD. That was my first professional position right out of graduate school. In fact, it was the Monday after I graduated, I started working at UCSD. And
man,
stayed there. Yeah, that was very fortunate. I mean, I had really good luck as far as finding, good jobs. And so I stayed at UCSD for about 15 years. And when the California state legislation to eliminate affirmative action programs and special recruitment and things like that came to be, it really struck me that, I really didn't go through everything I went through to serve the children of the rich. And so I kind of lost my mission. My mission was to help youth who were like I was succeed in college. And that started to change. And at that point, I started looking around, and there was a dean's position at San Diego City College. And when I walked on that campus, I thought, I'm home.
Right.
I mean, there was vast diversity of every kind, and every lifestyle, every walk of life, representatives of every community in San Diego. And it really felt like home.
We keep hearing people mention City College, and it so many artists have had the opportunity to get a higher education or get a stepping stone to another plateau. It's a pretty amazing place,
Right.
But
But back to the art activity. So when I came to San Diego, I went close to 20 years without making any art worth mention, right? And it really affected me quite a bit. I think it made me emotionally ill. And I have a friend who's been is a long-time art faculty at Mesa College, Robert Sanchez, who is a painting professor there. And every time I ran into him, he'd say, "Man, you've got to come to my class," because he had seen my work from many, many years ago. And every time I ran into him, he invited me. And so finally, I was in my late 40s. I decided to drop in on his class, and took maybe a series of 3 or 4 classes from him, and had my first solo show halfway through that period. My first solo show was at what's the name of that place? Voz Alta. It was a gallery then next door to Landlord Jim's bar.
Yeah, downtown on Broadway.
Right on downtown on Broadway and 16th, I believe.
Yep.
And so it just took off from there. It was like during those 20 years I had been storing images in my head, and the moment I started painting again, this flood just came out. I just couldn't stop. And to this day, I'm still bringing stuff out of that memory.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it has been quite a journey.
What part of San Diego did you live in at the time, or were you going down to Chicano Park, where you had already known some of the muralists? I know you're close with Victor Ochoa, and
right. I didn't know. I knew of the muralists. I had been to Chicano Park even when I lived in LA. I would come for the Chicano Park Day, and truthfully, when I came to San Diego, one of my lifelong dreams was to one day paint a mural there in Chicano Park. And it wasn't until 2011, late 2011, that by then I had developed a relationship with Victor and some of the other artists. And Victor invited me to collaborate with him on the Acela Bahia mural restoration at Chicano Park. Now, that was a very unique restoration in that it was an unfinished mural. It was a mural that was started, I believe, in 1973 or 4, and it was left unfinished because the scaffolding was stolen one night.
Whoa.
So Victor had maybe worked on the mural for a week or two and came to work on it one morning and it was gone. Somebody came and disassembled it in the dark of night and drove off with the entire scaffold that surrounded that mural. And it was left unfinished until 2011, 2012 is when we started working on it.
Yeah, I saw something about 78 and Ochoa doing it, but
yeah, it might have been 70. 72 is when all of it started.
Yeah.
And so sometime thereafter, each mural, came to life. And so.
Yeah. I know Victor also taught at Grossmont College, and you were there at Grossmont College.
Right.
You guys were both there for a really long time, right? How long did you?
Well, I wasn't there that long. Victor had worked there for many years. I believe in the late 80s and 90s.
Okay.
Teaching art, and then left and did murals and worked at the Mac Charter School. It was a charter high school where he worked part-time teaching art with the young people there. I came to Grossmont College in 2010, I believe, 2011, and worked there until last year when I retired from higher education. And so, all that time I was, very actively involved in painting and art and, doing that. I had retired once before after I left City College and was a full-time artist for 7 years, and I got a taste of that. And, the good, bad, and indifferent there, it was something that I wanted to return to as soon as I could. And so I did go back to work at Grossmont for about 7 years and then decided to retire.
Were you going into the art department at Grossmont at all, or hanging out?
I exhibited there at the gallery there, but some of the faculty were good friends of mine, Victor among them, and then Jennifer Bennett, and a couple of the others that were part-time faculty there. But I never taught in the department.
Grossmont College was so important for me. I grew up in East County, and I didn't get my driver's license till I was 19 or so. So I would ride a bike and get on a bus and get to Grossmont College to take every art class that I possibly could when I was younger, like 17, 18, And that art department was fascinating to me. And it was the very first gallery that I'd ever shown anything in. And I had sold a painting that I'd shown in there, my very first time exhibiting anything. And it was such a fantastic stepping stone into San Diego and, reaching out of me being stuck in East San Diego with no nothing, no opportunities for work or education or anything. Grossmont College and the Community College Arts District is just, it's an important thing.
Yeah, it really is. And, I've since then met, many of the students I worked with were art majors. And, I did a little counseling and helped them with different resources and so forth. But they all spoke very highly of the department, had a great experience. In fact, two of Victor Ochoa's airbrush class students are currently working with us on the Anastasio Hernandez Rojas mural there at Chicano Park. So there's a really strong connection with the college, even though I've left there already.
Yeah, I know that you're currently trying to restore murals, right? Like, what has happened with the virus and the whole process to working on murals?
Well, the mural we're currently on is not a restoration. It's a new mural at
Okay.
Chacon Park. And we've had to postpone. We've had to close down the scaffolding. Fortunately, we have a nice fence around the scaffold, and we had maybe 2 weeks of painting into the mural itself. It's a huge 7-story scaffold. It's one of the largest murals at Chicano Park. And so we've had to postpone it, which is very unfortunate. We did have a May 20th deadline, but it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get back there till after that. So,
well, I hope they put a stop on funds being taken out from scaffolding rentals and all that stuff. I hope the park isn't just losing a ton of money.
well, yeah, I mean, it's not the park itself. Usually, the artists themselves have to come up with the resources
Wow.
to paint a mural like that. So the funding that we get is devoted primarily to, equipment, scaffold, whatever we need. And so, those murals are often a very challenging project because, there's very little income that comes out of it, no matter how hard we try. And so we're, just it's an ongoing fundraising effort, that
Can you tell us a little bit more about the process for selection committees for murals and the restoration and things like that?
Sure. At Chicano Park, Chicano Park has a long-standing steering committee that's been in existence since its inception, and they have been I guess the curators of the park, for lack of a better term, the stewards of the park, I guess is the appropriate word. And they meet monthly. And in order for a mural project to be approved, their proposal has to be submitted to the steering committee with a good sketch of what you propose to paint, as well as the manner in which you're going to finance that project. Because I guess in the past they weren't as demanding of the end of it, and so there were, a handful of projects that started and were never completed because of a lack of budget.
Wow.
And so to prevent that, they really want to see where your funding's coming from and all of that. And so you submit it to the committee. The artwork has to have relevance to the park, to the community, to the Chicano Latino community, has to have something to do with the struggle, the socio-political struggle of the people of that community, including, other Chicano Latino communities, indigenous communities, Native American communities as well. And so once approved, the artists pretty much are on their own. They have to secure their own scaffolding, equipment, paint, and everything needed to create a mural. And then you find your team and you go at it.
I know, just reading about a mural that you did in the neighborhood here that's outside of the park, you mentioned reaching out for community involvement or just conversation before you started a mural. What's that like, engaging with the community at that level and letting them know that you're going to do a mural, or or what's the community, what's their thought on the arts in the neighborhood when you actually knock on a door or reach out?
Mm-hmm. Well, usually it's through local community organizations, bodies that already exist that have influence and have some credibility in the community. Mm-hmm. And so individuals that are involved in those organizations are the ones I tend to reach out to. If there are residents right around a mural similar to the one I did at Commercial and 22nd, right down the street here. Mm-hmm. Often the residents would come over and talk and ask questions. Before you know it, you've got great friends that are in the neighborhood that are supporting. And I really like to pull in the young people, if there's any available that are interested in learning how to paint murals. We always try to involve them. In that particular project that I just mentioned, we had about 8 young people from the community that voluntarily came to a meeting, signed up, joined up, and helped us create some of the smaller side murals that we did at that particular project. So it was really cool. They many of them, we mentor them ongoing, and soon, they have another opportunity for an apprenticeship of one form or another. And some are painting, doing great work on their own now. One young person who's a pretty well-known artist in the community is a product of that process, Hector Villegas, who has the studio in 1904 right down the street. He's been painting on his own for, close to a decade now. He started with us at Hasta Bahia. He lived in the community. We knew him through some of the Native American ceremonies that we do. And he just came over and started hanging out, and we brought him on board, and he helped us prepare the surfaces and do all pretty much the heavy lifting before preparation for a mural. And the beautiful thing about this story is the whole time that he was there, he was watching us paint. He wasn't painting much on the mural, but he was going home every night and painting on his own, teaching himself how to paint. And when we were done with that project, he invited us to go and see some of his work, and it was spectacular. It's amazing work that he began doing on his own, self-taught, just watching the artist's work. And so he came along as kind of as an apprentice with me for a couple more projects, and soon thereafter, I said, Hector, someday I'm going to be your apprentice. And so he's on his own doing great work.
That model of Chicano Park is so interesting. It's basically a living museum. It's the largest collection of outdoor murals in the country. It's newly historic for the state of California. And it, just like you're saying, there's new murals going on. There's restoration. There's historic murals. It's such an interesting thing that almost every neighborhood should have this kind of activism and beautification of the neighborhood, so that people respect and understand and, can see the stories. It's a really beautiful thing. One thing I wanted to mention. It
really is. It really is.
You did a restoration work on a mural at the San Ysidro Health Clinic.
Yes.
And just like you were talking about these young people participating, I know the original artist had passed. His name's Michael Schnorr. Is that how you say the last?
Correct, yes.
I know that you restored that mural with his children. That is such a beautiful story that the Union Tribune actually reported on that story.
Yeah, that was just a wonderful experience. It happened in the process of gaining permissions to do the art. I spoke to Michael Schnorr's widow, Acela Negron is her name, and she let me know that she was not the copyright holder. It was his sister. And so in talking to Acela, though, she said, it would be wonderful for you to restore that mural. It's in such disrepair, but if I could only ask one favor, can the children put their hands on that mural and maybe help you paint any little part of it? And it gave me chills when she asked. Absolutely. And they came on a few occasions and helped paint. And it was just, for her, for the mom, she told me, this experience has been a full circle for them. They've gone through the grieving, and now they've actually contributed some of their father's work. And that was a very, very meaningful experience for those children, for the widow, and certainly for me. It was just an awesome experience that really wasn't, but that's the way things turned out, and it turned out beautifully.
Yeah.
And so they helped. They came to the opening reception that we had, and so it was a very, very, very nice experience.
This whole idea of activism and teaching the young people, it's such an interesting thing about the mural process that I know Salvador Torres has given lectures at Bread and Salt here, and I've seen other moments where he talked about the community involvement in mural making, and also the restoration processes, working with young people in the neighborhood or young artists that want to just put in the time and elbow grease to repair something.
Yeah, I should mention that the two organizations that I guess commissioned the current mural that we're working on, San Diego Alliance and the American Friends Service Committee, are very grassroots organizations, immigrant rights organizations that have spent decades working on different cases here in San Diego and along the border. And so it was really working with the organizations that are doing the work really keeps us grounded, keeps us in touch with what the real issues are that we need to speak about through our artwork. And so it's very important for I think each of us that come out of that Chicano Park experience to stay connected that way. It informs our work and we contribute to the discussion as well. So it's been a really, really wonderful experience here in San Diego to be involved as an artist and activist that way.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about some of your personal stuff? I know we just talked about lots of restoration and mural stuff, but I know behind you have all these paintings, and I posted some photos of the gourd paintings that you were doing and stuff. I don't know if you have anything that you could talk about as far as the work in the studio.
Yeah,
I know the studio work is totally different than mural work. It's
right, but it's often some of the same themes. Let me walk around here a little bit and let me get the lights on.
And I found this quote online of you. You had said that you want to convey images that will educate and validate the contributions of working class people and people of color.
Yes.
I think you nailed it right there as far as just contributing to art and the neighborhood. It's a pretty concise way of saying it.
Well, thank you. Let me just walk around the room real quickly. One of the things I try to do is incorporate different ideas. For instance, this piece here. It's a creation of a mythical goddess protector of original corn, right? When I read about Monsanto taking over the patents on corn and forbidding other countries from growing corn that was not from their seed, it just blew me away. I thought, man, well, the indigenous people have to protect what they have, and so I created this kind of mythical goddess of corn. And so these are the types of themes that I like to weave. She's kind of a takeoff on a Virgen de Guadalupe, but then more aspects to her that are a little bit different than the Virgen. And so that's one. Here's one on a Chicano Park theme. On the day that Comandante Marcos of the Zapatistas in Chiapas retired, he declared that he was retiring from the revolutionary forces there. I resurrected him at Chicano Park in this environmental struggle that was going on. So I placed him, kind of juxtaposed him there at the park. So, those are the types of things that I play with. This is Jacqueline Carl Makin. She was one of the first children that died in the detention camps. You may remember her. And I placed her symbolically in an ice cube. Playing with the idea of ice, but the ice is melting, and so that'll give you a kind of an idea of projection of what's to happen, right? This is Fernandito Alonso. He was the Honduran boy who was the second child that died in custody, and you'll see there that I play with a lot of the imagery and with ideas that are haunting and educational at the same time.
Yeah.
La Bodega does a skateboard show every year, and so I decided to weave in some of the issues of the day into this piece. and play with the horrendous captivation of the children in cages. I think is such a horrendous event that our country's enduring right now. And so I take some very hard themes. This one is a piece that I did several years ago, and a lot of glare here right now, but there's a symbolic kind of border fence. And I did several pieces that had the border fence ending and something going on in that space where the fence ends. And in this case, I placed a Yaqui Indian deer dancer kind of doing a healing ceremony right there at the end of that fence. So these are, some of the ideas that I play with. I weave in, indigenous culture, Mexican culture, socio-political events of the day. This one's another called Dreamcatcher. This was actually Mitt Romney when he ran for president, and he talked about ending services for undocumented students.
Right.
So here you have the students kind of caught in that Dreamcatcher. Right.
Do you find it energizing or kind of exhausting dealing with such hard subjects? How do you exercise all those emotions? Do you at the end of the day after doing a painting or, working with such content, do you feel like you got something out, or do you feel like weighted, Because it's heavy duty stuff you're talking about, the detention centers.
Yeah, I think it's the weight that I'm constantly carrying. With these issues being on my conscience, and that caused me to paint, and getting it out is in many ways therapeutic and relieving. And at the same time, my idea is to bring people around these pieces and help them think about what these issues are really about. And so it's beyond educational. It's what Paulo Freire used to call concientización, consciousness raising, bringing these things into your conscience so you can act on them. And so that's kind of my process, if you will.
Where did the idea for painting on the gourds come from, too? Besides the substrate of the canvas, is that something
that was a total fluke. Someone gave me a gourd several years ago, and I was low on funds and didn't have any canvas, so I decided to paint on the gourd. It was a rather large one, and I got so much praise for it that I decided to go out and find out where I can get some more gourds. And I would do kind of a seasonal sort of thing for Mother's Day, for the holidays, Valentine's Day or whatever. And I'd incorporate different cultural icons. For instance, this one here is Dolores Huerta from the United Farm Workers, who helped Cesar Chavez found the United Farm Workers. And I've done several with Frida Kahlo doing different things. I took the Virgen of Guadalupe, and some people may think it's blasphemous, but I have her doing different sorts of activities that are positive cultural activity. Playing a Aztec drum, maybe singing with a indigenous rattle, things that I think she probably would not have said no to. And
I know Jim Brown has a set of muralist portraits that you did on each one of the gourds.
Right. He did a little commission there where he wanted some of the local Chicano Park muralists on gourds, and so and he wanted it in grayscale, and it was actually a very, very fun project, because I really got to look at the details of these guys' faces and personalities that I had never really done, even though I've known them for years. And so I got to kind of paint in detail some of their portraits, and that was a lot of fun.
Do you use photo references, or do you have people sit for portraits, or?
In that case, I used photo references. With Victor in particular, I've spent so much time with him, I practically have him memorized in my head. But occasionally I'll have people sit, and also, but it's usually more for the figurative work, working with the shadows, how the body casts shadows with different light and so forth. Not so much for portraits, though.
Are we missing anything that is part of your story that we didn't touch on?
Well, I mean, there's very important parts of my story. One of the most important parts of my story is the fact that I'm a father and grandfather. My children are my blessings and have kept me alive in many ways, because the activity that I do is oftentimes informed by that love for them, you know, and for their futures. Um, Beyond that, there's any number of things that we could talk about, but you know.
Do you see yourself as being retired now? I know that you retired from administration and education and stuff, but you obviously are very busy in Chacon Park and also doing stuff in the studio. Or is it just a new.
Well, you know, it was you know. Sometimes it's hard to talk about this, but you know, having worked in higher education was a very long compromise that I had to make in order to support a family and to, you know, afford a comfortable lifestyle. But truthfully, I would have preferred to be a full-time artist the whole time, and I'm talking 36 years of working in higher education. And so I retired from the compromise. Is what I did, and now I'm making art full-time.
I know I've been talking with you this morning about adding some of your stuff to the artist's website on the artist store on Bread and Salt, where the 100% of the proceeds go to the artist. We've had a lot of success selling stuff out of there where the proceeds are going to the artists, and I'm going to be catching up and mailing out some stuff today for some people. And yeah, hopefully we'll get some of your stuff on there soon, and we're going to keep adding more artists. And we also added a store for the main gallery, which is for Ponca's artwork. Ponca has stuff in both stores right now, but yeah, hopefully we'll be adding some of your stuff, and we're going to keep up doing these videos on YouTube. So I'll be adding this video today or tomorrow.
Great. Yeah, I'll refer some folks that didn't get to watch it.
I did just get a message that the cameras were blurry for a little bit, but really it's the audio we're after. It's not so much the main reason why we do it live is so people can ask questions, which we didn't really get any questions. I'm surprised, but lots of people watching. So
good. Well, I'm glad people are watching.
Yeah.
And yes, I'll definitely be uploading some work onto the store site.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for talking with me.
Well, you're very welcome, Tom. I really appreciate you doing this. And I think
I guess I forgot to mention too, you're a tenant of Bread and Salt.
Oh, yes.
You're just a few doors down from Jim Brown's main office. And yeah, and normally you would be able to have studio visits and things like that during the Barrio Art Crawl and all that kind of stuff. But Right.
Well, I should also mention that I've been running these, what I call artistic development workshops out of my studio for 4 to 6 students a couple times a week. And those have been really, really great. Kind of a blend of art making and art development of concepts and discussion about, you know, everything from techniques to what are the creative blocks that people experience while they're developing as artists. And so it's been very fruitful. We're going to resume doing those after the quarantine is over. Hopefully that's over sooner than later. But
yeah, you know, just that kind of act of getting a bunch of creative individuals together in a place where, you know, you can just bounce ideas off each other. It's so important. And you can see through so many moments in art history where people did that kind of thing. It's important to kind of get together as a group of creative people and just talk about art. Well, I think I'm going to end it, and we're going to add this video to YouTube, but I just want to say thank you.
Thanks again, Tom.
All right.
Be seeing you around. Bye-bye.